My name is Doug Brinks. I'm with the Grand River Woodturners Guild. Today I am doing this live remote to talk to everybody about sanding and finishing. I get questions about sanding and those out. You know, what do you think I'm doing wrong? So that's what caused this whole thing to start, which encouraged me to do a video on this. And plus, with our current lockdown and not being able to have live meetings, it's a perfect time to do something about sanding, because you can't really do it in a live meeting with all the sawdust in the air and the sand, you know, the sawdust in the air, and you have members breathing it and all. It's just not a healthy situation. So this is what encouraged me to do this today. With sanding, I have a piece here that it's a bowl from board. I actually incorporated more ingrain in this than what normally would be in a bowl. I've got a couple of stripes in here, boards that I flipped over to the ingrain side, so they are going to be harder yet to sand. So I should be able to get some good examples of what's happening when people are trying to sand out stuff. A couple things that I want to talk about. When I sand, I have all my my sanding disc here set up. I use a 2-inch sander for most of my sanding. And my setup is I have a sanding pad and a disc for every grit. My lower grits, like this is 150. As a matter of fact, let me grab my 120. I'm sorry, this is 150. You can see I have a very small pad in here. It's very dense, so I can get a lot of pressure on this, and that's a good starting. So this is my 150. My 180, I go to a let me find it here. Here's my 180. I go to a little denser pad. It's just a little, and it's not denser, I'm sorry, it's a little softer. It's got a little more push to it, so I can get in there. But when I'm sanding, I don't want to sand and push this all the way down to the point where I'm completely collapsing that foam, because then I'm just going to overheat my sandpaper. I'm going to ruin the Velcro on this pad. You know, if your pad sandpaper doesn't stick anymore, it's because you've overheated your pad. And once this gets hot, the Velcro don't stick anymore. So I have backing pads, and then I have intermediate pads, and then I have my sandpaper. The higher number and grit I go, the softer my pad is. So this is my 150. It's a little softer. I'm sorry, no, let me get them. Now I've got them all mixed up. Here's 150. Then I got 180. 150, 180. Then my 240, which it's kind of wore out. It's the same as my 180. And then my 320 and 400 are really soft. You know, so the higher grit I get, the softer the pad is, the less I'm going to push down on it. By having different setups for every grit, I don't ever overheat these. You know, about time my 150 is getting hot, it's time to switch to 180. So I'm constantly switching. It keeps them cool and they last longer. So it seems like a steep investment to get started out, and you're dumping about $100 into your pads and your intermediate pads, but it's a good investment. Every time I order sandpaper, I just order a couple of these replacement ones, and I have lots of them laying around. So if I wear one out, and when I wear them out, they wear out like this. They just plain are wore out from use, not from overheating. You know, so that's when mine wear out, and then I just throw another one on. So let me put these back. Okay, so my right now this is sanded to 150. I did not sand it with the lathe on. I sand with the lathe off until maybe I get up to 320, and I'm going to show you exactly why I do that. So I have a Milwaukee angle drill that I like. It works well. So let's let me turn the lathe on. And you know, I talk to people, and when they tell me they have these rings usually the first question I ask is, what's your sanding process? And their first response typically is, you think I'm doing that when I sand? I thought it was tool marks. And I'm like, you're probably doing it when you sand. You know, if you start out with by turning the lathe on and running your sander, you're tearing into the grain. You're burnishing the wood. The wood's getting hot. You're bending over the fibers, and once you bend over those fibers, they show up. If they don't show up now, they'll show up when you put your sanding sealer on. That's what's happening. So let me see if I can make that happen on this. I'm gonna set this at about I'm only about 600. It's not that high. Let me switch to a different camera here, and let me turn on my dust collection here. It's gonna be a little noisy. And that did not do what I wanted it to do. Let me back up to 150. Well, I did not get the rings in there like I expected to get. I've already sanded this. Maybe I've sanded to the point where I'm beyond everything that can possibly go wrong. Typically, I do not turn on the lathe and do that. I always sand with the lathe off, and this is my sanding process. And typically, I do this because the fact that I'm usually working with natural edge woods. They have holes. I'm doing natural edge hollow forms with big holes and stuff in them. A lot of the work I do is holy. I can't use the sanding tool with the lathe on. So my sanding process is typically, this is how I go through my grits. That's how I go through one grit. I do see out here, I do have some marks out on this farther edge from what I did earlier. I don't know if you can see those. Let me see if I can zoom in on those a little bit. You can see through here, I have some, and if I was to put some sanding sealer on right now, that would stand right out. And I can kind of see it goes all the way around here. And if I was to turn the lathe on and try to take care of that, I'm sure it would not work. And in fact, let me go the other way here. I still see I've got some here coming around here that is probably not going to come out. It's not going to come out unless I stand it, stop it, and actually hit it with the sander. I see some other rough spots in there. All right, let me go to 220 and finish this piece out once here, and let's see what we got. That's 320. At this point, I feel pretty comfortable turning the lathe on. If I didn't have big open holes and stuff, I'd go on the 400. So let me run some 400 on it, and then I'm going to throw some sanding sealer on it, and we'll see what we got. And if I did turn the lathe on, it's at the slowest speed. I'm not going to crank this up to 600 or 700. I'm at 120. Typically what I would do with a piece, I would sand it to 400 or 320, somewhere one of those two. If it's darker wood, I'm tempted to go 400 because that means I'm going to go to probably 600 after I do my final seal, but mostly I go to 320 and then 400. Now these marks here, which, let me go back to that other view here. I had some fill in here because these broke. When I glued those in there, this is all side grain, this piece is, and it chipped away in there when I turned that, so I had to fill that in. So those aren't actually sandy marks, those are for when I made a repair on the bowl. And this is typically the point where you're going to see any kind of sanding marks that you might have. I have some Paducah in here, so it's bleeding through pretty bad here. and I have some marks right there. You can probably see that. It's the only spot I had. So at this point, I would go back through and after this dries, I have that one mark there. That's about it on that maple, that piece of maple. After this dries, I'd go back in and back up to probably 220 and take that out. That's probably where that's at. But that's typically my sanding process there. I don't turn the lathe on until I'm at the very end of it. I don't turn it on until I'm at the end of up to 320 or maybe 400 before I actually will turn that lathe on and run my sandpaper across it. And then at that point, I'm only going to turn the lathe on at maybe 120. No, nothing faster than that. So let's see. Dave's asking, what kind of sanding sealer do I use? I use shellac cut in half with DNA. It's a great base for lacquer. It's a great base for shellac. It's a great intermediate base for a lot of things. I had somebody ask me the other day, I put some walnut oil on a bowl. I sanded it with walnut oil. Now I want to put lacquer on. Can I just spray that lacquer onto the walnut? I think you probably could after about a month, once the walnut oil cured. If it cures, we heard someone talk this morning that some walnut oil will never cure. But if it does cure, you probably could in a month or so if it was some quality walnut oil. I recommended after a couple weeks let it cure and then put a base coat of this on, because shellac with the DNA is going to get in there and it's going to dry it up, and then you can sand it, and then you'd be able to put your lacquer on without a problem. Let's see, I don't see any other questions here unless they're up there higher in the post. Let's see, I have nothing on, no other questions on our YouTube channel either. So that's my sanding process, and I'm very happy with it. I typically get done. I do not have those streaks in there, and if you do get the streaks in there, as soon as you see them, when I'm working on stuff with people, I can, you can see that. It's like, okay, we need to stop right now and back up. If I'm at 180 and I start to see those marks in there showing up, then at that time I'm going to say I'm just going to back right back up to 150 or maybe even 120 if I have to, and start all over again. It doesn't take that long. You just see me go through 180, 220, 320, and 400. It doesn't take long at all. It's a huge part of the finish of your bowl, though. If you do a good job on sanding, nobody notices. Nobody notices that you did a great job on sanding. But if you do a terrible job on sanding, a lot of people are going to notice that. So do the extra bit on sanding. I change my sandpaper like my neighbor that I don't like across the road over here is paying for it. You just change it. You're selling a bowl for $150. You don't want to spend $3 on sandpaper on that bowl. I just buck up and throw it away and buy more sandpaper. Just change it up. You'll be a lot happier. I've had that before where I thought my sandpaper was new. I'm sanding, and for some reason I can't seem to get through some marks I have on there. And change my sandpaper, and pow, there it goes. I just hadn't changed my sandpaper. So typically I got a new bowl on. I'm going to be changing the sandpaper on almost all my grits unless I know that the one in there is relatively new. Just so I go through them faster. So I think that's all that I have on this little demonstration. I don't see any other questions, so thank you everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you at hopefully one of our meetings coming up here. Our next meeting for the Grand River Woodturners Guild is next Saturday at 9 o'clock, and so stop in and check us out. If you if you're not a member and you want to join our meeting, send an email, make a comment on here. Let's see, Dave's got a question on here. Do you buff your finishes? No, I don't. As a matter of fact, I bought a Buell buffer. I've got it sitting back here somewhere. I used it a couple times. I use lacquer, and when my lacquer, I think, is pretty good. I posted a video yesterday on lacquer. This is my lacquer finish. There is, let me switch to this other camera here. This is my, can you see that? I mean, that's my lacquer finish with no buffing. I just shot it and with lacquer and I'm done. You know, I don't bother going in and try to buff and polish. To me, it seems like it dulls it. You know, the Buell buffing system, when I used that, it seemed to take the luster of this and dull it just a little bit. Wasn't quite as shiny. So this is 2 coats of lacquer on this piece. 2 kind of heavy coats. If you watch the video, you see how heavy I put it on. So that video is out there. So so no, I do not buff my finishes. Okay, I don't think I see any